Okay, and a third, the final one that I'll do is what happens when you sort of extend the coping pattern that's learned with the kind of trauma that people have. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the fact of so much loss, so much um, sometimes like terrible events that you have to deal with while you're an extremely emotional person, where you're a person who can't, if something bad happens, it's not like then you recover. When you're slow to return to baseline, it's exquisitely painful. And so, how do you cope with that over time? One thing that can happen is that a person becomes extremely impulsive. And just sort of when pain comes, they do make very rapid things to escape. And so what happens over time is they create and then are controlled by unrelenting crises. And this kind of impulsive escape behavior keeps things going to such an extent that it really disrupts other, important life goals because everything is always in crisis. And sometimes this is, the cues, the things that are being escaped are related to, again, what might be thought of as a bit more biologically based process of inhibited grieving. And that is, we're wired to, when you have trauma, numbing comes for a lot of people. And freezing response happens. And there's this sort of involuntary automatic process sometimes when you are overwhelmed that shuts down that's an emotional response, sadness, fear, etc. And so sometimes with grief and sadness, what can happen is this becomes such a pattern of self-interruption that inadvertently you set off the processes that sensitize you, that actually increase your sensitivity. So what happens is once you start to try to avoid or shut off or not come into contact with things that are painful, your brain has to have some part of it scanning, like, is there a threat here? Is the threat here? Is the threat here? Is the threat here? So your brain actually becomes more and more sensitive to cues that could set off certain emotions. In this case, I'm talking about sadness, grief, loss. So inhibited grieving, it can be extremely problematic in the sense of that it's a coping strategy, a sort of shutting down and avoiding or numbing out that inadvertently actually increases the person's sensitivity, reactivity to cues that lead to sadness and grief. Set it off. So this again is one of those dialectical dilemmas where a person can flop back and forth from under controlled to over controlled, and it can have big consequences in their life, and it can have a big impact on therapy. And so it'd be good to explore, how does this show up for the people that you work with or for yourself? Okay?